Today on the podcast, I'm excited to have Gabe and Rebekah Lyons joining me. It's so good to see you guys.
Yes, so good to see you, girl. Anytime with you is so great.
Yeah, thanks
It's
for having us.
yeah, it's a privilege to have you, and I'm looking forward to digging in a little bit with you. I don't think we've ever had Gabe on the podcast before, so this is
I
new.
know.
I
Hot
know.
seat, hot
Thanks.
seat.
Thanks for putting me on. I feel like I'm in a hot seat, but I'm
Free
looking forward
counseling,
to it.
Gabe. It's going to be great.
Listen, Deborah, I love learning from you. Anytime we've had you at our retreats or the opportunity to just listen to your wisdom, it's been so helpful for me. So thank you for what you do for so many people like me.
Well, thank you. I feel the same way about you guys and all that you're doing in this space. And I think one of the things I'm looking forward about talking with you today, I know that you've been in the space of emotional health for quite a while, relational health, spiritual health. And truth be told, we're all on a journey of healing. And as we heal, it overflows into our relationships. It overflows into everything that we touch. We don't just heal for us, we heal for everyone around us. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that that has been the story for you. So I'm looking forward to kind of hearing that journey that you've been on and how it's impacted your marriage. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about who you guys are, your family, what you do, just for people who might not be familiar with you, just to give us a little introduction.
So Rebecca and I, we've been married 28 years, and we live in Franklin, Tennessee, and really met in college. Have both really for 28 years
Yeah.
been trying to pursue, work that's meaningful. We've been able to raise four children now, raising that fourth one still, who's younger, that we adopted, who's 11. Her name's Joy. Two of our children have special needs. They have Down syndrome. So that's been like a unique facet just to our family, to our journey. 3 years into our marriage, that was like a big moment for us
Our
to,
firstborn. Yeah.
yeah, to
He's now
really
24.
determine how we
Wow.
were going to respond to a challenge, to what felt like trauma at the moment that we weren't prepared for. And then we both do work in the world. I mean, Rebecca's helped me from the very beginning when I launched something called Think, THINQ, thinkmedia.com. And that's really for 23 years, we've been convening leaders and talking about culture and helping them better understand how a biblical view and approach to cultural questions leads us to the best places. We end up flourishing more as humans. And we do that through a lot of events, online content, a podcast network, and so on. So that was something we launched in 2003 together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Lord has kind of wakened my calling later, a little bit later in life. I think I obviously called to motherhood. But when Cade was born, I just knew it was time to come home and just be full time at home for that season of him and then his brother 2 years later and his sister 2 years later after that. So I didn't really start writing and teaching until about 15 years ago when we moved to New York City. I developed panic disorder, and you and I have talked about this extensively, but God even used that dark night of the soul, that season of surrender, to awaken even the gifting of caring so much about calling, being where your talents and burdens collide. And I had some of that history in my family, so I definitely had a burden for mental health, and then also always like to chronically overshare. So whether writing or teaching, it felt like God was able to use that pain to become purpose in this last season. So it's been a joy.
Yeah, it's amazing. So currently, would you say you're entrepreneurs together?
Yes.
Yeah, I
He gave
always
us a
called it.
lot of ideas.
I called it
Yeah.
spiritual entrepreneurship. My early
Yeah.
days, because it didn't feel like it was like how can we make a lot of money. It was always how do we grow something that can be in alignment with what God's up to in an area of need
Yes.
spiritually that needs some resource. And I would say that's more how we think about it
Yeah.
in anything that we're doing.
And our
I think
wiring
that
is a
feels
little bit,
spot on with what you
yeah.
guys are doing.
Our wiring and temperament is very collaborative in that Gabe's an ideator and he has a gift of faith. So we'll be in the middle of an idea conversation and he's already texting someone about mobilizing that idea. And I'm like, wait, I think we're still processing. Whereas I'm a little more contemplative, but strategic and maximizer. So it's kind of fun to celebrate those strengths together and see throw paint at a wall and see what sticks. And
Yeah.
so that's what we've been doing for most of our marriage.
I think you do have to be really mature as a couple to be able to work together. You know, for a lot of couples, it's a downfall. It's like it gets sticky, and then the relationship and the business and the ideas and so it's neat to see the two of you thriving and continuing to have your individual voices, your unique callings. Like you have this thing together, but it's also so clear that you're individuals.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I did try quitting every night for like the first 5 years of our nonprofit on on my pillow in tears.
You've
So
been through the gauntlet.
trust me,
You're still here
this
though.
is hard fought.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. Okay, so let's talk about marriage a little bit. I would just love to hear a little bit about your journey with marriage. When do you feel like it was the hardest for you and why?
Mm.
And then we'll kind of move into where you feel like you're at today. And I'd be particularly interested to hear those early days, special needs child, kids. Early parenting is draining and depleting. And the more drained you are, the more susceptible you are to tension and argument. So I would just kind of love to hear you map out some of the pain points from your early days before we kind of
Mhm.
talk about where you guys are at today.
I would say for me, uh, years 3 to 7 were really difficult because that's again when our firstborn was born, and then life changed like completely, partly with that Down syndrome diagnosis. We had only been married 3 years, and it was, we had no idea. It was a false negative. So we found out 6 hours after his birth that everything
Wow.
was about to change. And even then, he was in the NICU on breathing and respirator and feeding tube. We were fighting for his life. He had failure to thrive and didn't grow that last trimester. So this all happened in a 24-hour period. So everything changed. So that kind of just gave us an option to turn toward each other and unite in this, or like isolate in our pain. Thankfully, the Lord helped us turn toward each other. But I would say over the next 4 years of just staying home, like leaving work that I loved, that I did find fulfilling outside of the home as well. Just I found that season to be a little more hidden and invisible and alone. And not that he wasn't with me, but he was gone a lot, whether it's traveling for work or just being gone in the regular work day because he was building and creating. And this was before we went out on our own. So he didn't have agency over his schedule. He had to work long hours. So that was difficult. And then I would say the other season that was hardest for me, and you can speak to you, but mine was around year 19. So we kind of got through New York together, got through, moving back to Nashville together. But year 19 to me was, I realized I had been harboring some things that I should have probably said year 3 or 5 or 7. And I didn't even know they bothered me until it kind of came out in an outsized, overreactive way. And I just realized I had harbored some resentment. So we had to get to the root of that. Especially, it was around the same time we were talking about bringing Joy home from China, and we were going to counseling to just get a tune up in our minds and realize, oh, there's some deeper resentments here, probably on both sides, that we've got to get to the bottom of so that we are more stable and regulated to bring this girl home who has no idea. She has no concept of a mother and a father. She's been an orphanage since 4 months old. So yeah, that I would say those are the
Mm.
two for me.
Yeah, and for
Gabe, would
me,
you
yeah.
say that was it for you the early one, 3 to 7, or year 19 that was most significant, or none of the above?
Well, I think the most recent feels most significant because that was really all in that year 19 season, probably year 17 to 20 for me was an awakening to my own need for deeper emotional health. I had lived most of my life not caring much about feelings, not seeing feelings as important or relevant, seeing them pretty much as something you tried to shove down and you just keep moving forward from. And I kind of came to the moment where I realized this was not creating the kind of relationship with Rebekah that I had hoped for. And she was experiencing that too. And we were kind of at a dead end of, well, what are we going to do about this? It felt like she had grown beyond my emotional capacity.
Mm.
She had been on her own journey of health and healing in ways that I was observing, but not participating in because it was so personal for her. And I think when I finally recognized how much was missing from our relationship because I hadn't been willing to go there and to at least ask some deeper questions about my own history, my own trauma as a
Yeah.
child, and how that had impacted how I related to people, especially Rebecca. Until I was willing to go there, I think we were at a bit of a stuck place. And so that moment of year 19 was us both now being like, okay, we're willing to go there, and Gabe's going there, not just Rebecca. And so
Yeah.
let's get some counseling, let's get some help to now go to like layer 2 of what that means. And that was really helpful and hard, but also freeing. I find the hardest seasons we've been through in our marriage when we've turned towards one another, which has really been the habit I think we developed from that year 3 with Cade, is it's hard, but it's good, and it always
Yeah.
produces more fruit,
Yeah.
unity, connection. And so we're thankful for those moments, but also find a lot of couples can get stuck there forever and
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
know there's a hopeful way to try to move forward.
Yeah, it took a couple years. I mean, I was definitely despairing. I was making agreement with like it is what it is, or I don't think I can do this. And I was internalizing that for a couple years. And it's definitely not the right way to go about it, but I I wasn't sure he would even get it if I tried, or when I would try, it was always just more like my opinion versus your opinion. It stayed very cerebral, and so we weren't really able to get to the depths of it initially. But when we did, I mean, man, that did help and that changed so much. But there was a tenuous season there where I was just like, just not sure. Like, are we just going to go through the motions for the rest of our marriage? This sounds terrible.
Yeah.
But I know so many people get there, and I can see why they stay there because both parties have to awaken to the fact that like this is real. This is not bluffing. This is really hard. It's really sad. I feel very alone.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that would be a really great season to zoom in on for a little bit. How did you even know that it was time for a shift? Like, what were you seeing? What were you feeling? What were you experiencing in yourself, in Gabe? And we're not talking crazy dysfunction. That's what I think people need to understand is that so many times in marriage, it's not these obvious crazy dysfunctional. We're not talking about addictions and affairs, and we're talking about apathy. We're talking about the frost, the
Mm-hmm.
mundane, the lack of connection, where things just start to slow down and leave you feeling discontent in some way.
Yeah.
So, what did that practically look like for you, Rebecca? It sounds
Mm-hmm.
like you noticed it first, like, something needs to shift.
Yeah.
Try to put words to help us understand what that looked like and felt like.
Yeah, I think in year 19, there was just some deeper hurts around just origin stories and us having different expectations of what we thought things would look like. And I do think we worked on a lot of it and we made step one, I would say, towards repair because we also had a ticking time bomb. We were bringing Joy home in 6 months. So we had to make it work. And so I would say it was helpful in that we understood we were saying yes to too many things. We were missing each other. We were working more divided than united on career stuff, on home stuff. We had different preferences on how to parent. It felt we like it was like, oh, we just need to adjust how we like parent in unity and our expectations with sex or our expectations with work or travel or it was all about a reset, I would say at year 19. Like you need to say yes to like less things so you stop missing each other. So that was a good start. But I would say COVID kind of showed us it wasn't just a tactical move of shifting calendar and releasing some freedom to
Mm,
be there available. COVID went to the heart level of going, okay, we can shift our schedule and make more tactical moves, in which I think parents and marriages start there. But what I realized in COVID is that even when we had all the time in the world, because we're stuck with each other, we
you could
didn't
still miss
connect.
each other.
We
Yeah.
missed each other, and that goes to a deeper place, like a different value system, a different sense of what I felt was secure versus what Gabe felt was secure. I think COVID was the great exposure of motivations, of like what leads to fear or what leads to wisdom or how we deal with stress. And so I think is where it got really hard. That was where I
So
was
so
like,
it
I don't think I can
sounds
do this.
it sounds like the main thing that you were feeling was disconnect. And so at first it's like, okay, we're feeling disconnected, so let's shift our schedules, let's shift the plan, let's look at, the logistics. And then it's like, wait, that only helps a little bit. So where is the disconnect coming from?
That's right.
What would you,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think I think we finally were able to ask the deeper layer questions. I was getting counseling from someone that was able to help me start to process through Rebekah's needs emotionally, how to meet those needs better, how to create better conversations that would actually get to the roots of her needs and what her longings were. And she was doing the same for me. I mean, it allowed us to start to have deeper conversations about what motivates us, what our fears are, how much we both have passion and vision to serve God, but sometimes that may come out in a very different way. And it's not that one's right or wrong, it's that they're different. And just trying to navigate even that, like what of this is just unique to how God speaks to you, how God works within, you know, your relationship and the outputs of that. And so the two of us had enough time during that season to really go into that deeper layer of conversation. And what it revealed to us is that we do have so many things that are in common that we were missing. So many passions, so many burdens that did overlap, but because we hadn't processed it at the deeper level, we were missing each other. And that was the moment where we said, let's start doing more together. Let's start pairing our gifts together more and starting to find the ways that we could unite our strengths and celebrate each other's strengths versus focusing on where we're different and how that could divide us.
Hmm.
And that ultimately led to a season for us that's led to a lot of helping other couples, retreats, conversations, emotional health. Like we've tried to not only go through the journey, but we've tried to help others get exposed to the people that have impacted us and helped us grow
Hmm.
and learn and help more and more people feel comfortable with a conversation that I find for a lot of the men I meet is a really uncomfortable conversation. They don't always know how to access the emotions in a way that their wives do. And
Hmm.
so they think life always is just going to be kind of ignoring that conversation or just getting through it or just kind of listening, but not having much to say in response. And we're trying to help now couples realize, hey, there's a breakthrough that can happen for you when you learn how to listen actively with one another and really start to share your vulnerability as a man and what your needs are and allow your spouse, your wife, to respond and to meet those needs.
It is really hard to connect emotionally when you don't have a high awareness of your emotions and what's going
Right.
on underneath the surface. It's like I think I'm giving you all I've got, but when you haven't gone underneath the surface yourself, it's really hard to give that part to your spouse. And as Rebecca's going underneath the surface and you're not necessarily now you're really missing each other. So
Yep.
you
Yeah.
had to figure out a way to get underneath the surface for yourself so that you could connect on that level. Gabe, what's something you learned about yourself? Like, why was going underneath the surface a little bit more challenging for you? Do you think
Yeah.
it's part of your personality? You're more cerebral, more in tune to your thought life? Do you
Mhm.
think it's partly from your family of origin? It just you weren't trained to do those things. Like, as you've been learning and growing, what do you think made it harder for you to go to that level?
Well, I did grow up in a home where emotions were not thought of as a high priority. I mean, they were looked at as weakness. And so I definitely grew up in an environment where crying was something you didn't do. And it did appear weak. And then I think what happened, though, that was probably most significant for me was when I was 12 years old. I did have an experience with a youth leader who later, through therapy and really processing this, I realized I was in essentially a grooming relationship that never moved to physical contact, but where I was overexposed to sexual fantasies, discussions, conversations, lots of things that at a young, 12-year-old age were completely inappropriate and essentially created such a sense of shame that I had ever even been around this person. This is somebody that was in their 30s, so it wasn't like another young person. that I had trusted, that I'd had this relationship of trust with for probably over a couple of years, a discipleship relationship. When it went to cross this line, and thank God, he gave me the insight and clarity to run and escape that relationship. But in that moment, I think what happened in my heart is I just locked up and said, "Oh my goodness, I've been trusting to this person. I've shared like my own thoughts and dreams and expectations in life and been very intimate in the sense of a conversation. And then they've literally turned that on me. And I didn't even know how to make sense of any of that when I was that age. But now, 20 years later, when I'm unpacking that, I'm realizing how much that caused me to shut down my heart and go, well, if I couldn't trust that person, I don't know if I can trust anybody with my
Yeah.
heart, with my deepest longings and vulnerability. It's just going to be safer to protect that. And then I found a lot of success in performing for value and for people liking me. And so that was athletics, it was work, it was career. And I think I was getting by. It seemed I was getting by okay with that. Um, and then when I realized I wasn't getting by because my wife didn't feel like she knew me. She, as one counselor said, she
She can love you, but she
she can
can't
love
have
you,
you.
but she can't have you.
Yeah.
And I could see in her eyes this sense of desperation, like not like, hey, I'm gonna leave you, but more like, I'm so sad this is all we're gonna ever have. And me feeling like I need to show up for Rebekah in a way that I don't have the tools right now to show up for, but my heart is longing to show up and to say to her, hey, if you'll keep being patient with me, I'm going to keep doing this work and I'm going to keep trying. And she was so gracious to be like, I'm all in. I'm not going anywhere. I just want us to have, the best relationship we could ever have. And so I think it was a combination of me feeling conviction about it and some sorrow, like some true biblical sorrow that I couldn't meet some needs that she had because I hadn't been able to show up for her in the way that I know she needed, combined with her saying, I'm going to create a safe space and secure space for you to keep growing and learning. And that I think gave me the motivation and enthusiasm to say, okay, it's worth it. Like I've got to dig in, go deep, and grow.
Was that the first time that you made the connection that maybe these things from the past are what are preventing me from going deeper emotionally?
Yes, 100%. I would
Wow.
never have connected any of that history to
Wow.
preventing me from having a healthy relationship with my wife. And it should have been obvious, I guess, but I without someone else to process it with, which I'd never processed this with anybody. Rebekah and I had processed it a little bit, but never through this lens of trauma, origin story, how that created a certain view I had of the world and people. I'd never gone to that layer of it. Again, because I
Yeah.
grew up going, hey, we don't go backwards, like we go
Right.
forwards. Like going
Right.
backwards is just going to pull me down.
Right.
So I had to change that paradigm to understand, no, this is actually the path towards growth into the future.
Well, and
Yeah.
one thing, he had started to venture into feelings, but then every time he would try to be vulnerable, it came out more accusatory, like, you make me feel shame or you make me feel inadequate or whatever. And so then I'm like, okay, that doesn't feel like a vulnerability. That feels like an attack. Like it's my fault that you feel anything negative
Hmm.
versus
Right.
maybe your history or your story doesn't know how to even process these conversations. And so then
Right.
he dismissed it. He's like, I've tried the feeling thing. I'm out. I like tiptoed into it. And I was like, it makes everything worse. I don't think it makes everything like, I will never forget that specific conversation we had. He's like, I've tried it. I don't buy it. I don't think
Yeah.
it's good. I think it actually makes things worse. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, okay, there we went. We tried. But it was true. We were both kind of new at trying it together. And I was so thankful he was willing to try. But if he felt like when he tried to express himself, I would reject it, or I would be like, wait, that's not the full
Right.
story. And he's like, well, maybe it's just better we don't even bother. I think I was probably the most hurt by his dismissiveness of like feelings as something that was even valid or worth actually raising, because he hung so heavily in the cerebral and the logic brain that that seems to solve problems. And I think probably my greatest hurt, even in the COVID year, was he still would give all his energy to trying to solve problems. So it would always be about protecting and providing for our family for a indefinite future, but it was never a priority, or maybe he just didn't feel, I'm not saying it wasn't a desire. He didn't feel equipped to know how to actually be present with me in the moment. It was always about like, I just need to solve and fix in my logic brain
Yeah, it's almost
for a
like the
future date.
performance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for a future date, so I can at least show up, no, like check I'm doing all these things right as a man, as I feel called to do. But I don't know how to just sit with her today and just listen to her and be curious about her, or wondering what her fears are, because I'm too busy just getting ahead of things. So I think that was like the biggest breakthrough of like, if you can't meet me now, I don't care what you're providing in the future. If you can't meet me today, then what do we even have in the future? So that's really that's not going to come out well for him. He's like, wait, I'm trying to build everything in the way that I know that I can be successful, and you're just kind of flatlining it because all you really want is me right now, and that's the place I feel most insecure.
Yeah. It's really interesting when, even the word shame comes up. And, for a lot of people, and I see this in men more than they realize, the bucket of shame is so full for whatever reason, things from the past, failures, deficits. I'm trying not to feel shame. I'm trying to, compensate for these feelings. The bucket of shame is so full that it's almost like I can't engage because I can't handle one more drop
Mm.
of something I need to do differently, of feedback, of
Yeah.
correction, of critique, because my bucket can't handle any more drops. It's at max capacity. So it's like, well, let's have a conversation about how we can do this a little bit better. Even that feels like I can't handle one more drop. It's already too
Yeah.
full. And
Yeah.
and then it feels like you are making me feel shame rather than, wow, why is my shame bucket so full? And where did
Right.
this come from? And how do I begin to empty it? And
Yeah.
so it's not uncommon for people who have really high levels of shame to have a really high level of avoidance of talking about emotions, but also really high performance, because
Mm.
it's almost like that's the only way they know how to compensate for that shame without having to talk about feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
do really well in everything that I can do really well in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up feeling stuck and feeling where
Yeah.
you guys are at. What was the moment, Gabe, that made you decide, I think I need to do something different?
I think it was one evening when Rebecca came into our room and she just says, I don't think I can do this.
Mm,
And she was directly referencing just the way we're doing marriage. Like I'm tired. And I could see it in her eyes, just this look of desperation. Um, it was very clear to me that this wasn't just like another decision to try to stoke an argument. It was kind of like a resignation in her voice and in her eyes. And God, I mean, it just hit me right in the gut. I could see it. It was very clear to me what was happening. I was losing my wife, and she was about to put up some hard walls that I don't know if I'd ever break them down. And it was in that moment that I just directly went to her and just felt like such deep sorrow and heartache for what she was feeling, and felt responsible for my inability to meet some of her needs. I mean, it's not that I didn't have similar feelings about the disconnect. Like I felt just as disconnected from her, but I guess I tried to look at it through this lens of, well, there's got to be more I can do. Like I've got to be able to show up more. And I think it was interesting. I'm intuitive enough to know, I'm cerebral enough to know that if I'm not meeting her needs, she's going to get this need met somewhere, because we all need to have those needs met. And I'd seen enough stories of women or men who go to get their needs met somewhere else outside the marriage. And I just knew like that's not going to be our story. And
yeah.
there's going to have to be more, of God showing up in our marriage, His grace to help me navigate the things that I don't quite understand. But I need her to know right now that I'm not going anywhere, that I'm committed to her, I'm committed to our marriage, and I'm committed to do work. And so I think that for me was a turning point for us. And she, again, the grace to go, okay, I can go further now, because at least I'm understanding that you understand where I'm at and what my hopes are.
Yeah. So fast forward to today. How do you stay emotionally connected in this season? What does that look like
Mm.
for you guys?
I have to say, Gabe is leading very well in this. I am so impressed with him.
Good job,
It's
Gabe.
I think
Am I performing well, Deborah?
I think he's leading better than I am because even just in the very busy season, with I'm trying to finish grad school, which again we could talk a lot more about performing for love. So it's not just on Gabe's side; it's both of us, and we both read the Soul of Shame in the same season because we both knew we were both carrying that and we were taking it out on each other. But I would say in this season, with like a book launch, or we are now full nesting, is what Gabe calls it, with our two kids, our oldest and our youngest with Down syndrome. So we're in a transition season that's new for all of us, but yet not a normal empty nesting season. It's like we still have two kids that are very physically dependent and emotionally dependent on us for their survival.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make sure that we slow down enough to be present for all the four of us, but then also get time with the two of us while we're still advancing things professionally. And I have found Gabe to just do these like sweet gestures, like out of nowhere. Even in the last week, what like a book launch week, and both of us traveling to two different cities over the weekend, just small, sweet little gestures just to stop us in the moment and like make sure we're making eye contact, having coffee on the porch, or like, he draws me a bath because he knows that like it helps me relax, or just helping with like get the kids breakfast first thing and then we can have a little more time engaging them. He's been very intentional and thoughtful. And I think for a lot of women, it's those small things that actually mean so much. It's not a grand gesture of, you know, an amazing vacation. While that's awesome, it's the small day, like it's the small rhythmic things throughout a week or a weekend for ice. Because I think what I was longing for all those years is like, do you see me? Do I
Yeah.
feel sometimes hidden or alone or invisible, even in front of
Yeah.
you? And for
Yeah.
him to just attune himself towards me, pay attention, recognize, and even name something he sees in me that he really admires. I just see that intentionality is like tenfold, maybe what it would have been, in
Yeah.
the past.
I see you. I'm aware of you. When I think of emotional connection, I think of Psalm 139 and how it specifically talks about all the ways that God sees us and knows us. And when you do this, when you do that, I am the witness
Mm,
of your life. And learning to incorporate that in big ways and small ways and conversations and the little things that you do throughout the day to stay connected.
mhm.
And not only that, you all just wrote a book together. And so before we have to wrap up today, tell us a little bit about this book, writing it together. Tell us a little bit about it.
So we wrote The Fight for Us, which chronicles essentially this journey that we're discussing of our marriage and the fight that it's taken to be emotionally connected and to have a unified marriage that thrives versus feeling division. And we've worked with so many couples now who feel like they have similar shared stories and experiences. They're overwhelmed. They're not quite sure how to break through that moment where they feel stuck. And we wanted to give them hope as well as guidance from all the amazing counselors, therapists, coaching, everything that we've received. We wanted to pass it on more real time and together as a couple. So what's unique about the book is we're both telling our stories. I would say we're just as vulnerable as we've been right now
Yeah.
about what we've struggled with and telling these honest stories that we hope will help more and more people feel comfortable as a couple, starting to process the things that are really hard that maybe they've buried, seeing that as the gateway towards connection and freedom. And so the book, every chapter has conversations for couples at the end that allows them to, start a conversation. And our motto here is if you're not talking, you're not healing. And we
Yeah.
just want to get couples processing again. And so we hope it will encourage couples that no fight that they're having is too big to
Mm.
be overcome when they turn and fight for one another versus against one another.
I
Yeah,
love that.
we were a little afraid to tackle this topic together. Any topic you write about, you often teach what you must learn. And then also, we'd never co authored anything. So But honestly, it's been such a gift because I think part of writing is noticing and naming. And
Yeah.
when you write, it's so cathartic because you're able to look back and notice and name like all the ways God has moved mightily in certain trajectory shifting seasons, certain pivotal conversations, certain revelations with one another. And we almost got the gift of documenting, our 28 years and from the very early days going, wow, God, even in spite of us, God was faithful to continue to soften us and humble us to turn towards each other. And we wanted to be as honest about that as possible. And I was so impressed with Gabe's willingness to go there vulnerability, like with vulnerability, because he's always been he's always been like the check on my chronic oversharing in past books. And
Yeah, he's
so
the
it was,
filter.
yeah. And so it was really sweet for him to go there fully, I think, from a
Yes.
man's perspective, because whether the person who purchases the book is a female or male, like it's very good for a woman to hear from the lens of a man or for a man to hear another man say something that they're feeling but don't have words for. So I'm
Mm.
so grateful that we got to do this together.
I love it. And I love that it was year 19 that took you to the next level. I think sometimes people think that what it is what it is and it only gets worse, or that change should have happened in the first decade. John and I are nearing year 19, and to think that even in year 19, God can take you deeper. God can
Yeah.
heal you more fully. God can allow marriage to be the mirror that
Mm.
reveals what he wants to heal. And
Mm.
it's just such a beautiful picture of becoming more like Jesus. And I just appreciate the journey that each of you have been on and that you're willing to vulnerably share with others. So thank you for
Mm.
pulling back the curtain on marriage. And I pray that this book helps so many other couples along the path of healing too.
Thank you,
Well,
Deborah.
thank you, Deborah. We're so grateful for you and all the work that you do.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for sharing your story. And I look forward to connecting with you guys more in the future and being a part of everything you're doing and looking forward to reading the book myself.
Mm.
Thank
All
Thank you.
right, you
you.
guys take care.
You too.
Thanks,
Bye
Deborah.
bye.